Over just a few short months, in 1992, a vicious monster stabbed or strangled at least 4 girls and women in Salt Lake City, Utah. After a lifetime of abusing kids, the killer crossed the line to murder. Countless unknown other victims of his perversion survived the ordeal. Even after the murders, it was not until the killer bragged to others in prison that police were able to find the victims and charge him with murder, when other inmates were so disgusted by his claims that they reported him. Roberto Arguelles, the Salt Lake City Strangler. Roberto Arguelles was born on the 14th of February in 1962 in Kearns, Utah. He had one brother, and when they were young, their stepfather moved the family to a pig farm in Salt Lake City, Utah, and put them to work. While he was a teenager, Arguelles began to have run-ins with the law. In September 1977, at age 15, he was arrested for attempting to steal a car. He received probation, which did not deter him from committing future crimes. Only a year later, in June of 1978, he was back in custody, this time for physically assaulting his girlfriend and family. Arguelles would spend a month in a group home after these attacks. Upon returning home, his criminal activity escalated. On October 5th of 1978, he kidnapped and assaulted a 10-year-old girl. Once again, he received soft treatment from the court. Despite the heinous act, Roberto was not made to stay in jail until his trial, but was allowed to remain on house arrest. While awaiting the trial, Arguelles continued abusing children and teenagers. There was a charge of violating a 7-year-old in November of 1978, which was later dropped, but only months later he was arrested for assaulting a 17-year-old girl. For the crimes he committed against the 10-year-old and 17-year-old, Arguelles was found guilty. He was sent to the State Youth Development Center in Ogden, Utah. It was recommended that he remain incarcerated until his 21st birthday. However, once again, he was treated gently by the justice system. The facility did not have a treatment program for offenders such as Arguelles. Staff attempted to get him into Utah State Hospital, where they did have such a program, but he was rejected as a candidate as the hospital found him resistant. Instead, he was released on December 19th of 1979 with the stipulation that he attend therapy sessions at the University of Utah. These sessions did not have their intended effect, and in March of 1980, he was once again victimizing children. He took a 15-year-old and assaulted her before releasing her outside of a school, threatening her with death if she told anyone what he had done. Only days later, Arguelles kidnapped a 14-year-old. This time, he took the girl to the pig farm and abused her at knife point. When she struggled against him, he slashed her neck, then dropped her off in a neighborhood in West Valley City. She survived and was able to get help at a nearby house. While in the hospital, she gave police a detailed description of both her attacker and his vehicle. Soon, Arguelles was arrested for the 2 attacks he had committed since his release. He was found guilty and sent to the Utah State Prison until he was paroled on June 25th of 1991. In August of 1992, Arguelles assaulted 2 children in front of an elementary school. He told the siblings, a 10-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy, that he was a security guard looking for some stolen items. Under the guise of searching them, he violated both children. When he was done, he dropped them off at their home. Barely a week after assaulting the elementary school kids, Arguelles tried the same trick again, this time using a fake police badge. When he attempted to lure 2 10-year-olds into his car, a nearby road worker saw him and intervened. Arguelles was soon arrested after the incident. He was charged with assaulting the brother and sister and received a life sentence with the chance of parole. However, Judge Kenneth Rigtup told the court that parole should never be granted to Arguelles, citing his repeated deviant offenses. For the next 3 years, Roberto Arguelles spent his time in prison bragging to other inmates about a series of murders he had committed. In 1995, police approached him for an interview. It was not long before he began to direct them to the first 2 victims' bodies. 16-year-old Lisa Martinez was walking to the local mall on March 30th, 1992, with her friend 15-year-old Tuesday Roberts when the two disappeared. Arguelles picked them up and then drove them to the family pig farm. There, he stabbed Lisa more than 40 times with a wood chisel. When she was dead, he strangled Tuesday with a rope, then buried them on the farm, where they were later found by police. Months later, Arguelles told police about two more murders. Margot Bond was a 42-year-old janitor on her way to work at Kennedy Junior High School in February of 1992. In June, she was found, stabbed to death in Tula County. The last victim that Arguelles confessed to killing was 13-year-old Stephanie Blundell. She went missing on her way to school, and 1 month later, her body was found in the American Fork Canyon. She too had been stabbed to death. This confession was reinforced with a former roommate, Pamela Milstein. She told investigators that Arguelles had shown her the jewelry he had taken from Stephanie Blundell. However, the jewelry was never recovered. Even with such a damning confession on record, Roberto Arguelles was not willing to submit to the justice system without a fuss. To begin their new legal proceedings, his lawyer petitioned to have the original convictions that put him behind bars thrown out. The argument was that Arguelles did not receive proper representation. When the attempt was thwarted by the Supreme Court, the killer's plea was changed from not guilty to guilty, and he waived his right to appeal. Now guilty for murder, Arguelles demanded that he receive the death penalty. The monster represented himself in court at the sentencing hearing and questioned several witnesses under the advisement of appointed lawyers. These attorneys claimed that Arguelles suffered from a variety of mental disorders, including multiple personality disorder. On June 21st of 1997, the killer was sentenced to death. Arguelles opted to be killed by firing squad and to not be hooded when he was shot. A date was set, but the automatic appeals process began, as with all death penalty cases. While these appeals were underway, Arguelles began his own efforts to carry out the sentence. The first attempt came after he had spent 1 year on death row. In 1998, Roberto tried to hang himself, and when this was unsuccessful, he began ingesting inedible objects such as paper, plastic, and his own waste. During this time, he became more violent in his legal proceedings as well. After multiple outbursts, he was wheeled into court, strapped to a wheelchair with a spit mask over his face. Roberto Arguelles got the last laugh on the world on November 15, 2003. A guard noticed the killer was unresponsive and ordered he be taken to the infirmary. There, he was pronounced dead of natural causes in the Utah State Penitentiary in Draper.